Welcome to a Thanksgiving Eve special of Conduct Detrimental. Dan Lust here, Mike Kravchenko, and T-Baby, Taryn Sharma in the house. Gentlemen, feels like Friday today, doesn't it?
It does. Oh my goodness. This is
This
the
is
most
always one of the
Friday,
best
Wednesday
days.
ever.
This is always one of the best days when you were in school, right? You get out early, typically on a Wednesday before Thanksgiving, but this kicks off probably one of the best, if not the best time of the year. You know, you're hitting holiday season right now. You've got some of the best sports possible. The real meat of the NFL season, college football coming down to the wire, the NBA is getting good, college basketball feast week. We are blessed to be at this point in the year.
Taryn, well said. Well said. It's also for our lawyers listening, it's getting to be the end of billable hour season. My fiscal year ends in November, so it's feeling like New Year's for me. We're getting close to the finish line here. And then I don't know. Thanksgiving is the best. I was gonna say, Taryn, like Thanksgiving Eve used to be a day back, pre-kids, pre-marriage, where we used to go a little wild.
Yeah.
That used to be the day. That used to be the day where people would go crazy. And I'm hoping you guys are young enough that you still can partake in those festivities. I am not. I'm not allowed to.
Well, I'm going to be staying home with Hadley and making a pie. So
Oh, get
that's a
after
lot
it, Taryn.
different way.
Get after it with that pie. Okay. Topics for today. We're going to keep this somewhat brief. We're recording this around 4:30-ish on Wednesday, November 27th. So if we miss a news update, you will know why. We're going to cover generally three principal topics, and we'll see what's left over at the end, but we'll try to keep this fairly tight. I'm just going to say the topics. You'll see why. We're a little, wading into the waters. We'll try to cover it as fairly as possible. San Jose State volleyball. I've been aware of this story, the drama back and forth. I had been hesitant to cover it on the podcast, but it kind of reached a zenith this past week, being covered by ESPN Daily and a number of outlets that hadn't otherwise been following it. We have a true legal update in the case, other than just forfeitures and whatnot. So we will talk about the San Jose State women's volleyball legal issue that involves transgender rights, women's sports rights, whatever under the sun. Again, we are not taking any position on it, but we think it important to at least advise you as to what is brewing. Next, we have the lawsuit of Baker Mayfield, quarterback for the Tampa Bay Bucks, suing Papa Mayfield and brother Mayfield. We will talk about that. It's not every day that happens. And then something we wouldn't normally cover, but very big. People in my office are asking me about it, so we had to dive in. That is the Drake lawsuit. No, not Drake, the college basketball team, although I'm told they're having a very good year. It is the Drake, Kendrick, Lamar beef that has now spilled into the New York courts. We will cover that. Reminder, our podcast sponsored by Themis Bar Review, top bar prep company in the galaxy. I've spent the entire year telling you how great Themis is, so I'm telling you again, Themis is the best. The best. Okay. Taryn, Mike, that was a mouthful. You ready for this? Deep breath. We ready for this? Ready to tackle this topic?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So I'll try to cover this as fair as possible. Sometimes we get into the weeds of these stories, and I get a lot of angry emails. We forgot this. We forgot that. We didn't mention this. We got this date wrong. This is not that type of a breakdown. If you want to go to a podcast for the true, unfettered, fully chock full of opinions podcast on this topic, this is not it. We're going to cover it enough that you will be dangerous at a water cooler and that you can be aware of and mindful of what is happening as a very big issue in college sports. We are not taking any position on it. We're just going to lay out the facts and have a conversation about what is occurring in the sport. Mike, Taryn, is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
I like it.
Okay. So let's start at the end and we'll work our way up to the beginning. Taryn, this story takes place in the Mountain West Conference in the women's basketball division. We're talking about San Jose State. We're talking about Colorado State. We're talking about San Jose, San Diego, Colorado. You guys know the Mountain West Conference. Okay, so we're not talking about Power 5, SEC, Big Ten, ACC. So that isn't relevant to this. Taryn, when is the women's volleyball playoffs set to begin. That's where we'll start. We'll work our way backwards.
Yeah, so the bracket is actually going to come out at the end of this week, December 1st, and then the tournament itself is going to start at the end of next week.
Okay. So the reason we start with the playoffs, there was a recent lawsuit that was filed, and Taryn, I'm going to kick it to you for the context, but a recent lawsuit that was filed to try to prevent an athlete, we'll put it in the hopefully as less objectionable of a term as possible, an athlete that many believe to be a transgender athlete, someone I don't believe is fully out one way or the other, but to prevent an athlete in particular on the San Jose State women's volleyball team from playing. That's where this starts, and a lawsuit or an application was filed. Taryn, give us some more details on the application and the result of that application.
Yeah, so this lawsuit was filed a couple of weeks ago, and it came from current and former athletes at 5 other universities in the Mountain West Conference. Like you mentioned, this is the conference that San Jose State is part of, and you also mentioned that there were some forfeitures. And while none of these schools had at the time said exactly why they were forfeiting these games, it was believed to be because of this one individual who was playing on the San Jose State team. These individuals who were filing were also joined by the current co-captain at San Jose State, so a teammate of this individual, as well as a recently suspended assistant coach who I saw had been making the rounds on cable news discussing this. And they were arguing that if this individual was not prevented from playing in competition going forward, that it would violate the rights of the petitioners under Title IX and the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause.
Okay, let's pause. That was a mouthful. Taryn, that was very well articulated. Again, we're going to be as sensitive and as delicate on this topic as possible. So we, as you've noticed so far in this podcast, we are not mentioning this individual's name. That was the position that a number of outlets have taken. If you're curious, right, you could pop on Twitter and Google. There's enough people that have done that, but I don't believe to this point the individual involved has self-identified herself in this. So we are certainly not going to do that. Taryn, you did a good job breaking down the legal side and what's being argued from a legal perspective. At its core, right, outside of any specific legal doctrine, these athletes on other teams, and there are athletes on her own team that have voiced an issue playing games from a fairness standpoint, from a safety standpoint, with an athlete that might have an unfair, and again, we're not saying does because we're not confirming anything, but that allegedly, purportedly may have a physical advantage because they were born different, right? Again, we're not going to be so technical on terminology, but you guys get what we're saying. This is an individual who was not named to the first team, and I was looking at this on Instagram. It was announced yesterday. First team Mountain West All Conference. They were honorable mention. So San Jose State is not known as an elite volleyball team in the conference. They have, as Taryn mentioned, picked up a lot of wins via forfeit, where the other team just chooses not to play against them. So there have been times this season, my understanding, is that better teams with better records that probably would beat San Jose State if they matched up on the court just chose not to play in an act of, I don't know what we'll call it, but it appears to be some type of act of solidarity standing against an individual of this type playing on a women's volleyball team. Again, we're not taking any position, but that's what it appears to be. Now, Mike, you've been very quiet. Do we feel good? Do we feel like we're going to get canceled? Do we feel like so far we've been very neutral on what we're saying? Fair?
No, I think we're good. Yeah, there's no cause for concern here.
Okay.
We're explaining the news.
Yes,
Yeah.
We're explaining the news. We're not reporting. We're human beings trying to do this as fair as possible. I want to just lay this out, and then I'll hand it to you, Mike and Taryn, just to talk through this. And I think we've provided a fair context. There is an issue on her own team with another athlete on her team joining in a lawsuit, which was seemingly targeted at this the subject volleyball player. So there is some real issues within San Jose State. And Taryn, you mentioned the coach was involved, who was also making the rounds on cable news. So it's not just an issue of outside teams forfeiting. It's her own team having issues, but continuing to play games with her alongside. So it's a really interesting story from a human being level. Okay. Now, I will say this again: if it gets me in trouble, it gets me in trouble. But I'm trying to stay as as much to the script as ESPN was comfortable on a Disney platform saying. So I feel like we're okay. This athlete that is involved is not, for our purposes, LeBron James, right? They are not the number one volleyball player in their sport. They are not, proverbially like 7'5" and all the extremes from a skill standpoint, from a physical stature standpoint. My understanding is the individual involved is around 6 foot or 6'1" in that vicinity. And there are much taller athletes on premier teams across the country, be it Wisconsin or Texas, you name it. So this is not someone, and again, we didn't cover it in the podcast, but people will understand the Leah Thomas situation, where she was breaking women's swimming records, and people were complaining that she should not be eligible for competing in women's sports. The reason I'm saying she, my understanding is Leah Thomas has self-identified as a she, and I don't believe the individual at San Jose State has said anything one way or the other. So I am certainly not going to say it. If someone wants to correct me in the replies and say it, but that's the only reason you're hearing it from me. This is, again, not someone from a physical, statistical standpoint that's like number one in every category. They're not at, Wisconsin or Nebraska or Texas. They're at San Jose State, which, again, I think we're being fair, is the Mountain West Conference. It's not the elite of the elite conferences and the number one team in the country. So this is a very different landscape than we have that University of Pennsylvania dealt with Leah Thomas however many years ago, 2-3 years ago. So that's it, right? San Jose State is getting some advantage because this athlete is making honorable mention in the Mountain West Conference. They're not 7 feet tall. They're around 6'1". Their statistics, while above average and good, are not like elite. But the team sitting out does present a real legal issue. And when they go to the court system and try to get a temporary restraining order to prevent this athlete from playing in the playoffs, and that's denied, now all of a sudden we set the stage for some real drama. And again, we are not these people, so I don't want anyone to read into this, but people that feel very strongly on either side of the aisle, looking very closely at the situation. So if you are a lawyer and you are into sports, you're into college sports, you need to be prepared to talk about this case and educate yourself enough to get into the weeds. Okay. Hopefully I'm not canceled because I don't think I said anything bad, but I will hand it over. Taryn, Mike, are we missing anything else that people should consider, be it legally or whatnot with respect to this matter?
Well, yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head, and that it's a very hot button issue and becomes representative of an entire sort of issue for a lot of people. And that's why this case in particular is important. That's why I think people are paying so much attention to Mountain West volleyball in a year when, most people probably couldn't tell you all of the teams that were in the conference otherwise, right? Like, this is a conference that we typically think of when we think about late night football on a Saturday. But people do get very invested because they feel very strongly one way or another about this. And I think that the reason why this is interesting is because Judge Cruz, who is in the Northern District of Colorado, which ruled on this sort of preliminary injunction, there is kind of like a time factor here, right? There is, I think, probably for the petitioners here, a fear that if they don't get some sort of resolution on this, that they don't know whether they're going to be able to continue to play, or if they're going to be able to win on their own merits going forward in the tournament. And from the other side, the player is kind of dealing with the uncertainty that, are they going to be permitted to play? But generally, the how the court ruled here is that other courts, higher courts, circuit and Supreme Courts, have established protections under Title IX and the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause, that they also apply to transgender individuals. And so because of that, these plaintiffs, these petitioners, were not likely to prevail. And so that's, I think, something that is important for us to talk about. What is the standard and why were they ruled against here? Because it's not necessarily 100% on the merits, but it's a little bit on the merits.
Well, let's unpack it, right? And again, we'll try to be as fair as possible. And I think Taryn, it's a difficult topic, right? I'll say this, and then I'll kick it back to you. And Mike, feel free to join in as you see fit. The NCAA has tried to, punt the issues of eligibility to the underlying governing body of a particular sport. We've seen that in swimming with the Leah Thomas situation. We're seeing it in any number of sports. The NCAA, as we've talked about in previous podcasts, is really trying to distance themselves from their own set of guidelines to govern a particular sport, be it NIL or when it comes to transgender athletes or women's sports eligibility. They try to punt that. San Jose State is faced with an interesting situation. They have an assistant coach that gets fired. They have a main player on their team, again, not the athlete in question, enter a lawsuit that is essentially attacking a teammate of hers, all the while these two athletes are playing with one another. And again, I'm not a volleyball person in terms of like understanding the sport that well, but I understand people they will set up people for kills, right? Someone's like punching the ball in the air, and the other players in the team will like spike the ball. My understanding is that the setter is the individual involved with this lawsuit targeting the athlete in question. So it's a very interesting concept all across the board. San Jose State's position seems to be, we are not going to by ourselves sideline this athlete, and this athlete is eligible to play according to the criteria that we have. So short of our misinterpretation of the law, we are going to proceed as planned. And Taryn, the schools in the Mountain West are taking varying positions, whether they should sit out, whether they should play. So this is playing out before us. And again, it's not like an issue of first impression. We had something similar occur, not that far in the past in the Summer Olympics, when we had this issue occur in boxing, when a certain fighter, and again, not necessarily here for discussion, but seemed to quit on a match early because seemingly in an act of protest. Again, people can look up the athletes that we're talking about. But this issue keeps coming up more and more. And if you look on Twitter or wherever discourse you're reading these articles, you'll see some people with some very strong opinions in the replies. Our goal on this podcast is not to, sometimes we'll try to, put our opinion on something. We're not doing it here, but now know enough about the facts as our listening audience to go out and, make your own impression. But as lawyers, you're doing yourself a disservice to not understand this case. Taryn, I will kick it back to you. We don't have to spend so much more time on it, but of the legal arguments, the standard of which the court at least relied on to reject the requested relief.
Well, yeah, essentially, I think what's being asked here is this a slam dunk case? Are they likely to prevail on the merits? And if so, then maybe you issue this preliminary injunction. But what the judge here felt is that based on what appellate courts and the Supreme Court of the United States have said, is that that the argument that's being put forth by the plaintiffs here is not likely to prevail on the merits. And so there's no, they're not going to declare in their favor right at the outset. This is something that I think is going to need to go to trial, probably not something that's going to be decided immediately, right? And so I think that puts everyone in a tough position where this has been hanging over the team's head, the conference's head for about a year, and really like the entire sport's head. But the fact of the matter is that things don't necessarily get decided that quickly, right? We've got to go through the legal process that has been established, and that's the only way I'll say that we can get closer to not disenfranchising someone's argument. So giving time and allowing the process to work out is really the only way that we're going to be able to get to a resolution that is more equitable.
That's fair. Mike, I'm sensing by your face that you are not dying to get the last word on this topic. Is that fair? Yeah,
that's very fair.
Mike wants no part of this. But listen, we navigate the waters. I'll just say this: if we could put a fine, we always try to give you something to just watch. We're not just diagnosing what's happening. We try to assess things that are changing in the landscape. We've talked about this issue coming up, right? In women's swimming, with Leah Thomas. We talked about, women's Olympic boxing. Up to this point, and again, sometimes people fact check me in the emails and they leave comments on Spotify. It's all good. It's all good discourse. I am not aware, and again, I could be mistaken. I'm not aware of college teams en masse basically organizing with one another to perform some type of collective action to protest a school's position on an athlete's eligibility. I'm very clearly not saying certain words, but that could mean a high school athlete that shouldn't have eligibility. I'm just not aware of opponents sitting out en masse in protest of school's position on something and then going ahead and filing a lawsuit. So, San Jose State is taking the position.
I just want to point out one thing, Dan. It's interesting that it has become such a hot button issue because this individual has been playing for the team for 3 years. And I'm not sure exactly why it's only suddenly become an issue.
That's a fair point. My understanding is that they played somewhere else and actually transferred to San Jose State.
I think this is their 3rd year at San Jose State.
Either way, let's assume that to be the case. That doesn't really matter for our purposes. I don't know why it's bubbling up just now either. It doesn't. As I spoke to people around the story, some people associated with the Mountain West Conference, some people that just knew a lot about volleyball, that was the big question mark. Regardless of where you fall on this, left, right, I don't. To your point, Darren, I don't know why it's coming up right now. And again, I'm not aware of any collegiate precedent where this has happened. So I'll leave it at that. It is something, by all means, we do a what to watch for at the end of every episode. This is the main what to watch for. And that's why we lead with a women's volleyball story for the first time in conduct detrimental history.
Yeah. Can I give a little prediction? I think it does work its way through the courts. And I think that this does end up going to the Supreme Court.
I think this is the type of issue that, for better or for worse, is a political issue. And I think it's an important issue enough to get up there. It's not a new one. Women's wrestling has been an issue and women's basketball, but something new is happening. And again, this is not a political podcast by any means, but Donald Trump, who won the election, very much ran on this issue being one of his primary issues. So Taryn, I will join in your prediction that this is going to make its way up and up the court system because it is a political issue, for better or worse, and there's a lot of attention being paid to it. Okay, that's our prediction. Again, if we're wrong, we're wrong. It is what it is. Guys, if this is our last podcast together, what's the Taryn? Well, let's on a lighter note. What is the Nick Castellanos home run call apology? What is it? I know you know it.
I don't know if I'm going to be putting on this headset again, whether it's for my bosses at Fox or elsewhere. And that's a drive to left field.
That's a drive to deep left. It's a home run by Nick Castellanos. I don't even know if I'm going to be here tomorrow. Yeah, it's a great line. Great line. I think this was fair.
Saw what because he did the Boston College game. The Boston College quarterback was named Castellanos, and so he had fun with that.
He knows what he's doing. I saw a crazy, I think it's a Reddit thread that Castellanos has like an obscene amount of home runs, like after tragedies in people's lives. Like,
oh yeah.
No, but it's like not really normal. It's like the PA announcer for whatever team he was playing for died and they were announcing it on air and then he like homered mid announcement, like PA announcer, has passed away. And it's like, and there's a deep drive. Oh, Castellanos did that again. It is odd. It is very odd. Okay. I don't think this is our last podcast. I think we covered it in a fair way. I hope our listeners trust us enough that the takes that we've said in this podcast, they're not, sharpened because we are not, I don't know. I'm not saying anything bad. We are sports people. But this is a sports issue. It's a difficult one. We want to give it to you. I've talked about it enough with colleagues that I thought this particular lane was a fair way to cover it and probably the most important way to cover it. Okay. I will stop talking. Taryn, let us move in a complete 180-degree direction. Talk about a topic that is more synonymous with issues that we do cover on this podcast. And Mike, I know you're familiar with this case as well. Mike, I think it's safe to chime back in now because we're not talking about women's volleyball anymore. I think it's safe. It's a safe space.
Thank you. No, I'm ready to get back in action.
Yeah, lead us off. I know, Taryn, we do the show notes, we do the Google Docs, we talk. I said you were going to do this one, but Mike, we got to share the rock here in Conduct Detrimental. I take it. I
That's a
pass it to
little
Taryn.
fun inside baseball you gave him there.
Sometimes you got to do it. But right now, Mike, you're open for the corner three. You're basically like that guy in Auburn that's getting really upset that we might be winning in the podcast right now, but you're not getting the ball. Mike, here's the ball. And tell us what's going on with Baker, Lamar, Mayfield.
Yeah. You with the middle names always gets me. But yeah, it's pretty crazy that we mentioned it earlier. Baker Mayfield is suing his father, and that's for about $12 million, alleging a breach of trust and financial mismanagement. And that's claiming that he had made a loan to his father's company that was not repaid and pretty much killed him in finances. He's alleging that pretty much can this first off, my question is, I mean, suing your dad is crazy. Can that actually, as someone early on in their law school and law student life, can that actually happen? How would that actually go through? Professor Dan, I'd love to hear as you are raising your hand here.
You have two professors here. I will say, and you see this in the movies a lot, there is a special like husband and wife spousal privilege that will come up from time to time. You are, as a parent, allowed to sue your son and vice versa. It is sometimes more common than you would think. So obviously, it happens in the States, right? If someone's suing for an estate and let's say mom dies and dad is in a lawsuit with son and daughter, like it happens in that context, certainly. The weird one where it comes up, which you would not expect, like not in the States context, is like in car accidents. Let's say dad is driving a car and son is in the passenger seat, and it's dad's fault or mom's fault, whoever the parent is driving the car, and son suffers an injury, right? Mike, intuitively, do you think you could sue the driver of the vehicle even though it's your dad or your mom, your dad, whatever?
I guess, I mean, now you have me questioning. I guess not.
Oh, you should have trusted your gut. There's a lovely word here, and I love bringing it up, and I love telling people that I have an insurance defense background. 4 or 5 years ago, but I still like to recall it. Insurance, my friend, insurance. Insurance covers any type of collisions and whoever's claiming against it, unless it's fraud or something else. But it happens more than people realize outside of family context. So the answer to your easy question that I wanted the easy question. Taryn can have the hard one. The answer is yes. There's nothing stopping family members from suing one another. Okay, now save that hard question, and I want you to direct it to Taryn. Do not put it anywhere near me. I'm not ready for it.
What's the hard question we're getting at here for Professor T?
You
Baby
said first things first. Here's my first question. Let the record reflect that
the next
second question appeared to be
He's
coming.
just saying, if a hard question comes up, I'm your man.
I got you.
I'm not. I'm off. I'm off the hot seat.
Yeah, no, there's we'd also mentioned the brother earlier, Matt Mayfield. So I guess that would be a little bit of a different scenario compared to the father, maybe. But what's interesting about the lawsuit to me is that this was during a time where Baker was really going through a transformation in his NFL career, because it was between 2018 and 2021. Apparently, over 12 million was transferred from the Mayfield personal accounts to the team BRM, which was the then Texas Contract Manufacturing Group, which is completely without their knowledge. To be structured why this is coming up now, all the way from January, from September 30th of this year, 250,000 was to be due, and then another 250,000 was to be due at the end of this year, so on December 31st. So it'd be 3 million plus the interest would then go from December 2025 to December 27. Whatever the details, not as important. But what's crazy is that failure to meet these obligations constitutes a default. So what this is saying here is that it's allowing the Mayfields to demand an immediate payment of the entire outstanding balance from the company. Yeah. So Taryn, I see, you seem ready to jump in. What does that really mean here for the company here? I mean, there's breach of contract, there's unjust enrichment, fraudulent conduct. There's so many things here. And then, what are the Mayfields, meaning, Baker and his wife, Emily, they're seeking the full repayment plus interest and all the penalties for the breach. So, it's really pretty early on in the lawsuit here, but the family and business dispute, I mean, is interesting here. And I'd love to hear your take on where you think this is going to go, if anywhere.
Yeah. Well, I think families sue each other all the time. I don't think that that's necessarily an odd thing. But just jumping back here, just so everyone understands the structure, you've got Baker and his wife, Emily, who are obviously famous for their progressive commercials. They live in the Cleveland Browns Stadium, or they used to. And then they have an entity through which they do business. It's called Team BRM. And so that's pretty common, right? You have an LLC that you operate through. He agreed to finance his father's operation. It's called Camwood Capital Management Group, and it has subsidiaries underneath it. Camwood is run by his father, James, and then his brother, Matt, also serves as the managing director of Camwood. So you've got Team BRM on one side, that's Baker and his wife, Emily, and then you've got Camwood on the other side, that is uh, James Mayfield and Baker's brother, Matt. And then Camwood also has subsidiaries. And in this case, you mentioned Texas Contract Manufacturing Group. So that entity is the one that was doing business. And we don't know exactly what they were doing with that money, what the intended goal of using that money was. But significant sums of money over a 3-year span were transferred from Baker through this LLC, TBRM, to Texas Contract Manufacturing Group. And that is whatever the arrangement they agreed to. But that money was not being repaid for some time. And they had been asking for details with the understanding that that something fishy was going on. And so they eventually reached the settlement. And that's why I actually think that the structure of the settlement is important here. They were trying to be nice to Baker's father and brother here and Camwood, and making sure that that money was paid back over time. That $250,000, that sort of first blown deadline, that indicated to them that they weren't really going to get this money paid back. And that's why that acceleration term existed. Right, Dan?
Yes. I think, Taryn, you've provided a lot of great nuance here. That's why it existed. If you're going to give somebody, and just to put some specific dates on it, according to the ESPN article that I believe the two parties, be it the Baker and Emily side and dad and brother side, reached a confidential settlement effective January 23rd, 2024, in which Camwood Capital would repay a total of $11.741 million plus interest in installments starting September 30th. So it's 9 months, right? Am I getting it right? 8 months. 8 months lag
Yeah.
time, give or take. So, yeah, I mean that's step one. And if we haven't stated the obvious, right? Like this situation is, at least as it started, and I'm not going to talk about 12 million, right, being necessarily representative, but one family member as an NFL football player, basketball player, and baseball player making millions of dollars and then quote unquote taking care of family members without proper documentation is not atypical, right? That happens a lot. The fact that $12 million disappears from someone's account, that is interesting. The fact that Camwood Capital, at least according to reports, is not Baker and Emily are not equity owners or have any real interest in that company where the money is going, is also interesting. Sometimes, yeah, the rich athlete will pay a lot of expenses, but there'll be a 50-50 partner in, Uncle Larry's joint of, hot dog stand venture, whatever. Like they'll have some sweat in the game. So the optics of $12 million disappearing, Baker Mayfield, and this obviously popped up a couple months ago when we covered it on the podcast. It was probably this time last year. We said this is odd. This is not really that typical. The fact that it's even reached the press. Okay, now, Taryn, this is where I think it gets interesting. The confidential settlement agreement is reached. Okay, maybe we don't know what happened. Maybe people got sloppy with accounting. Maybe dad, who raised Baker his whole life, didn't have all the answers. But family's family. Baker's made a comeback in the NFL, signed a really big contract with the Bucs. $12 million is not as much of an issue as it was when he was basically being kicked out of the NFL with his Panthers run and Rams run. So the case quietly gets settled January 23rd, 2024. Now we have two people very adamantly on other sides of the V, right? Fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, right? Now we have the second time where questions are being raised. So it's $11.7 million. And regardless of whether we thought Baker's dad and brother and these guys were liable in the first instance, I think everyone was willing to look past it and the money would be paid back. Now, it's not really an issue of liability. And again, I haven't seen a copy of the settlement agreement. But, Taryn, to your point, when money is not paid, right, and it's a payment for the, instrument for the payment of money damages only, it doesn't really matter what liability is, because generally in that settlement agreement, you've waived everything. You've said, this is it. We're waiving this. We're waiving that. We're not accepting any fault or responsibility. We're just making the payment for the hell of it. This, again, we're not commenting because we haven't seen the contract, but this starts to become a much clearer case of non-payment, and one that we're not really going to spend that much time talking about liability, but one in which now dad isn't all of a sudden voluntarily paying back 11.7. He's now being walked to court to defend it. So right. A lot of the defenses, I imagine, were waived by the nature of signing that settlement agreement in the first instance. That's what I would like to point out.
Yeah, assuming that the father and brother had good representation, that's exactly what it would have said. But I think that this is it totally makes sense, right? That first payment is due on September 30th. It sounds like it wasn't made. We're basically 2 months removed from that. And if payments aren't being made and you're not really getting a lot of information, and this is kind of like a track record that your father and brother have had, I can understand why you've got to take this step.
As I'm very famously quoted as saying, "Mo money, mo problems." I made that up. Trademark me right now. Yeah, it's not going to be the first time family members fight over money. It's not going to be the first time, divorces happen over money. A lot of things happen. So again, it's Mike, to where we started this conversation. The setup of this is somewhat atypical, but family members fighting over an athlete's millions of dollars, and that's certainly not. But credit to Baker for turning his career around. So this $11 million is not the only money he's clinging to, which, I think adds another element to this case. Okay. I'm looking at both of you guys. Both look like you are ready to move on to our third and final topic. We're hitting about the half an hour mark, probably a little bit more, a little bit less. It's okay. Mike. Okay. This in the like parallel universe where we don't host a sports law podcast and we host a music law podcast. Shout out to the music law podcast out there that I've never heard of. This would be the A story. You do an entire podcast on this. It's Drake. It's Kendrick Lamar. We thought it was done. We thought Drake had lost. And just as he, was fading into the background of having taken the L and trying to rebuild his image, he emerges with a bunch of lawyers and seemingly takes another giant L in the court of public opinion. Mike, tell us about the lawsuit. We'll see if we want to get so much into the substance. I have some general thoughts on the strategy of filing the lawsuit, but explain to our listeners what Drake is attempting to do in this this filing in New York court.
Yeah, I think first it is relevant to our sports world. Drake might be the largest and worst sports bettor on planet Earth, so that's definitely in our world. Anytime you want to win a bet, just see what he's putting on stake and do the opposite. Now he's in the news
Isn't Kendrick performing at the halftime show this year for the Super Bowl?
He is, yes. Kendrick is doing the Super Bowl, which was also an extremely controversial thing because it's in Louisiana and it's Lil Wayne. That's another thing. Is he actually going to do that song? I don't know. I personally hope not, because it's just an insane song to do at a.
Of course he's going to do that song. It's the most popular song in the world.
Of course he is.
Yeah,
of course he is. Of course. Gentlemen, it didn't take us that long. We found the sports law tie-in. This is a sports law story. I apologize for misdirecting you. This is 100% a sports law story, because this lawsuit certainly is an attempt to impact at least certain lyrics that are done in that song. I digress. I will stop talking. Mike, you have the full runway. Get as nerdy as you want to get on this, but I'm very comfortable with us getting in the weeds here, much more so than I was on the first topic, but get as nerdy as you want.
All right, I like it.
Wop, Mike, fuck him up.
So Drake filed the lawsuit through his company Frozen Moments, which I had no idea about, but filed the petition in New York Supreme Court, but he also filed a pre-suit filing in Texas as well, targeting UMG and Spotify, as well as UMG and iHeartMedia, which was in Texas. So they really focused on two main allegations, if you haven't seen it already, and streaming manipulation and payola, as well as the defamation claims. So in New York, the petition accuses UMG of manipulating the streaming services to promote Kendrick's Not Like Us track at the expense of Drake's music. So it's highlighting the use of bots to artificially inflate Not Like Us, and UMG allegedly offering Spotify a licensing fee of 30%. UMG is the Universal Music Group who actually licenses out the music. So that's who works with Spotify.
And importantly, they repped both Drake and Kendrick. That is very important to this.
Yeah, they're pretty much, I mean, the overwhelming majority of artists kind of work through UMG. So you may see UMG claims on Twitter, on YouTube. That's kind of who goes out and files copyright claims on YouTube videos, or on, if you're posting a Twitter video with your stuff. So you may see Universal Music Group targeting you. So here, Drake is targeting them. They're saying, he's alleging that there's radio payola here, that there's third-party promoters were paid to prioritize Kendrick's music. And, there were people on Twitter and I even saw on LinkedIn, funny enough, that they're scrolling their Spotify, they're typing in any type of artist, and Not Like Us was coming up. So you could type in Adele and Not Like Us would come up in the recommended songs.
Can I just a little bit of color on that, because we did some digging on this. My understanding, because we're a big Amazon Alexa household. Like, so if you say Alexa play, and you don't know the name of the song, but you say like the song that has the lyrics, whatever, you say something like that, it'll get you to the song. So people were allegedly, again, I saw this, I saw a video of this that went somewhat viral. People were saying, play Certified Lover Boy, right? Which is a well-known Drake song or a Drake lyric. But because that album, whatever, because that phrase is now being used by Kendrick in his song, Not Like Us, Kendrick's song was coming up to those type of devices. So that's the type of granular type of allegations being made, that listens and downloads and plays that should be going to Drake. Drake is somehow accusing his own, UMG of basically conspiring with Kendrick to pump up his songs over Drake's songs. That's the holistic level to explain it, but that's very important.
Well, let's just try it real quick. Hold on one second. Hey Siri, play Certified Lover Boy.
Boy by Drake on Spotify.
Oh,
they're fixing it actively.
They're fixing it.
They're
fixing it.
Not even Drake, but I don't
it
think
is.
Was that not
That's
Drake?
Champagne Poetry.
Okay.
Oh, it is.
Taryn, I like that was a cool little thing we did. That was almost as cool, and actually I forgot we did not talk about this update. It was almost as cool as when we looked up Ken Turkel's Instagram bio and we tried to figure out how many pictures demonstrated him showing his drumming proclivities. Taryn, what was the line before I'll weave this back in. We said over 2.5 drumming based photos for Ken Turkel.
Yeah, out of the first 9, right?
Yeah.
2.5.
And you said over, right?
I said over. Yeah, I was expecting 4.
Yeah, Lannister always pays his debts on this show, and we talk about bets. I try to pay them off. The answer is that it was under. It wasn't under by that much. It was under. And the second answer, okay, just because this is not a defamation-friendly podcast, Ken Turkel might be the man. I told Taryn I have a lot of interest in common with Ken Turkel. So if you're a friend of Ken Turkel, you could say that I'm a fan of Ken Turkel's. Florida lawyer representing the Florida basketball coach. Just check your receipts. 2 episodes ago. Okay, Mike, jump back in. We're off.
Yeah, we're back to, you mentioned the defamation. We'll actually jump into the defamation here because that's another allegation. Because when it comes to the streaming manipulation and bots and inflation of plays, that's commonplace in the current, music space, especially just within the Spotify and Apple Music. That's something that goes on consistently. There's Drake, mentions limited evidence, including a YouTube interview where there's an unnamed individual who claims Lamar's label, which was Interscope under UMG, actually used bots to boost plays. And that's been going on in the industry. And there's been a lot of, conversation around that, whether it's Taylor Swift, Drake, Kendrick, whoever it is, inflating at least their labels, inflating the numbers. So that's not so much, new, but it's new for the Not Like Us track that it blew up to that level. But the defamation allegations are actually filed in Texas, or will be. So the defamation in Lamar's song "Not Like Us," where the lyrics, like we mentioned, certified lover boy, in quotes, calls Drake a certified pedophile. So it's saying that, hey, that's obviously, if there's any, that was the first thing that Drake was like going right at. That's that one lyric that he responded to. That was the big thing. Like, no way, this isn't. That was the one thing that he really harped on. So UMG,
Can we let's pause on that. That's where I think the meat of this conversation lies. And I think I'm okay getting into the weeds with you guys on this. The allegation that calling someone a certified pedophile is defamatory. Are we guys ready for this analysis?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Truth is an absolute defense.
Yeah, Taryn, I knew you were going to say that. Okay, that's not exactly how I was going to phrase it. I was doing a lot more delicately, but that is what Kendrick Lamar's side is going to say, and in as blunt of a fashion, right? Pedophile, at least as you would think of it in common sense, it's not a legally defined, topic. It's not like you're a convicted felon. Like, I know what that is. When you're a convicted felon, like, that's either true or false, right? So if you make an assertion of fact, a factual assertion, you could be held to have committed some form of defamation if the thing that you're saying is not true, okay? Now, where it gets gray, we talked about this ad nauseum in the Pat McAfee stuff. If you're saying something in jest and you're not saying it like it's a factual assertion, it is hard to show that that's a actionable statement. And similarly, right, if you're using a term of art like pedophile, right, which I again, we'll see what the defense offered by Kendrick's side is. But if you're using that term, I think one could argue that that is an opinion-based word, right? It's like calling someone an idiot. Like, an idiot means that someone's stupid. It's not true or false. Like, you're not saying that they have an IQ of less than 10, which is verifiable factually, someone's IQ or someone's LSAT score or someone's SATs, right? That someone's stupid. You're calling just someone an idiot in broad terms. A pedophile, right? Like, again, we're half joking, but it's like, if someone's opinion is that, and that's their opinion, and they have, I don't know, let's just say it's their opinion, number one. Okay, they can defend that. If Drake wants to win on the point that it's a fact, Taryn, to your point, then that opens up a McAfee and Brett Favre level can of worms for Kendrick to try to show and put on blast all of the instances that he might reasonably and in good faith believe that Drake is a pedophile, which, why I alluded to the strategy of filing this lawsuit, I think is an insane proposition. So many eyes are looking at this case. They're paying attention to it. And again, I'm not really so close to the music world, but the general consensus on social media amongst people that were following the rap battle is that Drake lost, like, hands down. It wasn't really that close. He shouldn't have started with Kendrick. Kendrick's the greatest. I think the book has been written for Drake to follow up months later, like not in the heat of the moment, and months later to file a lawsuit in which he is inviting Kendrick Lamar to tell everybody the gray area of why Kendrick believes that Drake is a pedophile is an insane thing to do. Completely insane. So whether Drake wins or not, I know that there are many on social media that were putting Drake on blast by killing his whatever he had left in the field of a reputation, that he's killed it just by the filing of this lawsuit.
I don't know that I agree that there's any real harm to Drake at this point. I mean, any of the videos that are out because Kendrick just needs to scroll Twitter or go on YouTube for 5 minutes and he can find all the clips that fans had put together as to why he can associate that thought process of being being quote unquote,
Mike, we were going to agree at this point. Yeah, it's not that bad for Drake. And what could happen? Again, listen, we don't know what's going to happen. Doug Gottlieb settled that Casey Close, Freddie Freeman lawsuit, and I thought Doug Gottlieb might have had a case to defend it, and it ended up looking good for Casey Close because the case went away, and it looked like Doug Gottlieb withdrew the statement. Kendrick Lamar is not Doug Gottlieb. Okay, with all due respect to Doug Gottlieb, Kendrick Lamar is made of millions upon millions of dollars, and Kendrick Lamar just saw 4 months ago that beefing and beating Drake in a war greatly helped his bottom line and the plays of his songs. He is financially motivated from a record sales standpoint to drag this thing out as long as he can. and he can turn it into content, right? So like I
Sure.
think, and then just on the law, I think that Kendrick has a pretty strong argument right out of the gate. I'm not really touching on UMG. I can't really speak to the back end stuff of boosting plays and whatnot, but to the extent that a defamation case is filed ahead, and I looked up the attorneys that filed this on behalf of Drake. They're from Wilkie Farr. They look like First Amendment lawyers. I think Drake is getting ready for a big and extended First Amendment battle on defamation. I don't view that to be particularly wise because, Mike, as you just said, right, like diehards and people that are really into the beef, they know about all the conspiracy videos and YouTube videos and different things of reels that Drake has done. But this is now going to reach the general population, and all of those videos, all of those
It's true.
conspiracy theories are going to be viewed 10x, right? I don't know. Even let's just say this, assuming Drake wins, right? Like, congrats, Drake wins. I have a hard time seeing how this improves his status in the music industry. Like, you just have to think those things. He could win, maybe. Like, I'm not ruling it out on any of the points. But if Drake's goal is to restore his pre-Kendrick beef levels of reputation, this was not the way to do it.
I think that if he scores a big win for defense that musicians have going forward, I think that people will, at least within the industry, respect him more for that. I just don't know if he's going to be able to do it because, one, he's taking on a massive music empire in doing this. UMG, you mentioned, is by far the majority rights holder, but on the other hand, Drake owns the rights to his own masters. He bought them for $500 million. One thing that I have seen a lot of people posting online, which I think is missing a little bit, they point to one of the songs in this back and forth, the Heart Part 6, where Drake says that he like basically fed all of this information to Kendrick, and that's why Kendrick is lying because all of this information was fed to him. But the things that he specifically points to are the album cover for Meet the Grams, not specifically the what he calls the Epstein angle. All of that he points to Kendrick having discovered those through TikTok videos that were collected and dissected. And so I think anybody who's saying, hey, you said that you fed him in that information, is that not going to be a defense? No, I don't think so, because the defense there, or the information that was fed there, is not about the pedophile accusations. It is about the Ozempic and those sorts of claims that were also made in Meet the Grams. And this is specific to Not Like Us and the claims that are met there. But I think that Kendrick draws that line to Drake through some of his associations, and those individuals are convicted or have been involved with cases that as Kendrick says, are weird. So the accusation of Kendrick lied about Drake harboring people who are involved with sex crimes, I don't think that one's going to be difficult for Kendrick to push back against.
Yeah, it's interesting because the discovery phase is going to begin. So I'm interested, I guess, in how they're going to substantiate any of this. The streaming manipulation, like the defamation, of course, is, I think, what we're going to focus on, here with within the first, I guess, the defamation within this song specifically. But I think it is a little bit. I know, Dan, you mentioned we don't know to get into the weeds of the streaming manipulation, but I think both of these need to be put in that same upper echelon of like 1A, 1B, because it completely changes. Not only just diss tracks, but music in general. Streaming, we've been trying to figure out how streaming is going to actually equate to record sales and everything, and that angle is going to completely change. And then defamation, do diss tracks just completely go away? Do parody tracks just completely go? Like, where does the line then I guess we'll find out where that line stands. But Dan, I mean, I just don't know where. I think both of these are going to completely change the music industry, and this is arguably be on Taylor Swift and Adele, and I mean Drake is there, so this is like one of the largest artists of all time coming in and basically attempting to completely change the music industry for
So
I
Taryn,
guess.
you guys both hit this, and I want to just I agree that what Drake is doing to try to get discovery from Spotify and figuring out the streaming mechanism and algorithms, I respect that. It's fine. Coupling that and making people call this the Kendrick Lamar lawsuit and kind of shoehorning in or giving signals that he's going to file this defamation case, that's where I think the issue lies. So if Drake wants to be, the Colin Kaepernick of music and take one for the team in order for the greater good of the industry, by all means. I just as counsel, I think those are two very different topics. And again, if your client wants to proceed with it and your client wants to pay you a lot of money to file it, you better have a good faith basis for winning the case, which I do think Drake has at least a good faith basis for thinking he could win on defamation. I just have a really hard time thinking in what world he leaves the defamation analysis any better. That's all I'm saying. The defamation piece probably brought in good faith. I just question the reputational harm that will be caused by pursuing this any further, by putting a larger spotlight on the L that you already took to Kendrick Lamar. That is where I will die on that sword. I will happily die on that sword. Okay, gentlemen, we are about at the hour mark. Let's do a quick what to watch for. The topics that we wanted to get to that we didn't necessarily hit. Maybe we can sneak them in here. Let me think. Mike K. Any sports things you're looking for? Any other lawsuits that you find interesting that we did not touch upon?
Yeah, the Cody Rhodes, we shared this, or you and I shared this a little bit earlier this week. Cody Rhodes, the Fanatics and WWE filed a motion to dismiss his lawsuit, which alleged infringement of his IP. Rhodes was claiming that his rights were violated through merchandising practices after his departure from WWE, while he was gone from WWE during the time. It's all revolving around trademark ownership, the contracts between WWE and Fanatics, but also Cody Rhodes. And
there's a very nerdy part about this that I'm hoping that you saw, but it's incredible. You ready for this?
I'm ready for it. Yeah, let me hear it from you.
So Cody, and I'm a wrestling nerd, so I've already said in the podcast, I don't really follow the current product, but I know the old product pretty well. Cody Rhodes, his dad, was known as Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream. So when Cody made his comeback to to wrestling and went through AEW and the Independents and then back to WWE, he was going by the moniker the American Nightmare. And he has this very important, a giant American flag skull neck tattoo. Probably not an advisable tattoo that we would tell any of our young lawyers or lawyers to ever get because it looks insane. And when Cody got this tattoo during his comeuppance, when he was coming back through the wrestling, make his way back to WWE, he got this insane neck tattoo. It was insane, but it seemed the logic at the time was, well, now that he has a crazy neck tattoo, WWE can't brand him as any other character other than the American Nightmare because he has a crazy tattoo in his neck. For reference, Cody Rhodes had been Stardust and had been some weird stuff in the past. And he's like, I want to be the American Nightmare. I'm not letting anybody control my destiny. I'm literally branding this on the top of my neck. You can't even hide it with a shirt. So apparently the American Nightmare name was registered by a kind of hardcore band years ago. It was somewhat relevant. No one, I'd never heard of it, but Cody Rhodes had reached a deal to be able to be known as the American Nightmare and get merch sales so long as this, the term American Nightmare was used in a wrestling context. Okay. You guys with me so far? So the question is whether and to what extent a shirt that literally just has the words American Nightmare with a silhouette of this skull and bones cross tattoo, whether that is sufficient to rise to wrestling paraphernalia. There's no wrestling imagery. It's literally the words American Nightmare and then this really, I think it's a cool tattoo, a skull and bones American flag tattoo. Mike, actually, let's ask Taryn. Taryn, if you saw that and someone was wearing that shirt, would you understand that to be a wrestling shirt or just something American Nightmare that you don't know about?
I probably associated with the wrestling.
You knew that. And you're not the biggest wrestling guy.
No, I know it because of this conversation. I actually had no idea about any of this.
So but if you just, well, that's very interesting. Like, if you don't know that's wrestling, then this rock band is basically saying that WWE and Cody Rhodes violated their I guess their licensing agreement to use the mark by not using it in wrestling paraphernalia. And then literally WWE has come back in their initial response and said, literally, like, people know, you see this silhouette, it's Cody Rhodes. So the question is whether that has rise to the level. It's really like what kind of survey and what type of audience reviewing that mark, whether that mark, like, I think, Taryn, you would understand the Stone Cold Steve Austin skull and crossbones. Like, I think you would know that, or the
Yeah,
Rock's Brahma Bull. Like, I think you know what that logo is.
yeah.
I don't know if Cody has reached that level, but that's in the nerdiest of nerd things, Mike. I'm so happy you brought it up. No one is talking about this lawsuit, and I find it to be very, very interesting.
No, listen, I listen to Cody Rhodes' theme song in the gym almost every day, so had to bring, this is something that's definitely on the radar.
We're not going to follow up for further comment on that. But yeah, we're just going to let that sit right there. Taryn, you're what to watch for.
Yeah, Mike, no neck tattoos though. Okay.
Right here.
Okay. Well, as we exit a week of chaos in college football with all of the SEC contenders, pretty much bar Texas, going down, I I was looking at some possible brackets, and I'm not happy about the structure. I'm not happy that and I'll tell you why. So currently the four conference champions are locked in. The Power Four conference champions are locked in through 1 through 4. And I think that actually is a bad thing, in that the 5 seed can end up being more appealing than the 1 seed. If you get the 5, you play the 12, which that's probably going to be a group of 5 team. And then you play the team that is the worst conference champion, the 4 seed. So if that is Arizona State this year, no offense to them, they could win a game, but if you're Ohio State or Oregon and you end up in that 5 seed, you play Boise State and you play Arizona State, it could be tougher for the 1 seed, whether that's Ohio State or Oregon, that they would have to then play Georgia in their first game in a neutral site. And so I'm not necessarily sure that the system as it's currently set up, this bracket, makes sense. And I think that what they need to do is either reseed after every round to ensure that the regular season has the maximum amount of value, or they need to just rank them 1 through 12 to begin with, and put them where they're supposed to be, as opposed to having the 4 conference champions locked into those top 4 seeds.
I think that's well said, Taryn. And, I think we all, anybody that was following space, predicted it, that this first year of the 12 team playoff would have issues. I don't think Indiana is doing us any favors in terms of like quieting the noise around the space. But there will be issues. I saw, Boise State has a very high ranking, and I think if you put them on like a FanDuel or DraftKings, algorithm against some of these other Power 5 teams, they'd be a dog. I am with you. I'm again, it's year 1. We'll figure it out. I'm watching very closely. I think, Taryn, your Ohio State Buckeyes, if we're talking about bets in the future, I think the Buckeyes, I think it's their year. Listen, I could be wrong. I think it's the Buckeyes' year. I saw that line was out yesterday, plus 250. Buckeyes are the favorite, but it's still good money, plus 250. I like the Buckeyes. While we're here, really quick, and then I'll give my what to watch for, and then we'll call this a day. We talked very quickly about the Bryce Underwood situation last week, and we had a huge development, like a massive development that I wish we would have known when we recorded the podcast. Bryce Underwood flips he's a top high school quarterback in the country, flips his commitment from LSU to the Michigan Wolverines. So everyone's like, oh, it's pretty cool, but it's kind of weird. Like, LSU's having a bad year. So is Michigan. How do they end up with Bryce Underwood? Like, they were talking about $10.5 million. How did they get him? The reports, which I believe have been confirmed, which it seemed like a it seemed kind of like a Mad Lib of like NIL people for the purpose of the story. It was like Larry Ellison's girlfriend spoke with Dave Portnoy, and they worked together, with Connor Stallions to get, the commitment for Bryce Underwood. And it turns out only one of those people were not involved, and that was Connor Stallions. So the story comes out from Dave Portnoy's mouth that the Michigan
Well,
collective.
we think he wasn't involved, but he is coaching Bryce Underwood right now.
Who's coaching Bryce Underwood?
Connor Stallions is coaching at Belleville.
Oh my God! Hold on. Are you messing with me? Is
No.
that real? Oh, so
Yes.
when someone was saying that on Twitter, that wasn't just like lions and tigers and bears. That was like actually Connor Stallions has real ties to this kid.
Yeah, he's coaching there.
Okay. Connor Stallions, listen, hot take. Connor Stallions is incredible. Okay? This guy is just the gift that keeps on giving. It's a hot take. Taryn does not like that as a Michigan, sorry, not as Michigan. As an Ohio State somewhat fan and a Minnesota fan. You do not like that take. But in any event.
As a human being with morals and ethics, I don't like that take. He's a bad person.
Okay. Listen. Okay. He was very good at what he did. Let's just say that.
Cheater.
Fair? He wasn't. Listen, it's not. Okay, we don't need to relitigate this. It wasn't. Okay, fine. Technically, it was cheating, but it was like, it was like going to a golf game and like you basically just make a par putt and the putt doesn't really matter, and you're like, you know what? I'm going to give myself that. The other guy had a birdie. It doesn't matter for the score. It didn't really matter. Like Michigan was going to win those games anyway. Do you not really genuinely feel that Michigan?
No. Why would I feel that way? Ohio
because
State was right up there with them. They were equal teams, but knowing what is going to come, especially when it's plays that haven't been run all season, they're only run in practice. That's obviously cheating. It obviously gives them an unfair advantage, and they should be punished for it. And if the NCAA has any power or any ability, which remains to be seen, they will be.
But what if every team in the conference was doing it? What if everyone was doing it? Okay, we don't need to debate this. Okay. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't, but okay. We can agree to disagree. I was with you. I really was with you, and I wasn't sure how much of an advantage the Connor Stallions effect gave until we saw Michigan dog walk everybody in the college football playoffs en route to a national championship. And that really did change my opinion that the team was just supremely talented.
Who did they dog walk? They were in a tight game against Alabama. Alabama, who had almost lost the week before to Auburn.
Okay,
they were in a tight game.
We're going to agree to disagree. We're going to agree to disagree.
And then they beat Washington. Washington's defense wasn't that good.
We will agree.
They won the national championship. I'm not saying that they didn't win the national championship. I'm saying that they got there through illicit means.
Taryn, what to watch for? Just let me get my barbs in. You don't need to come back with these really well thought out affirmative defenses and counterclaims and calling me out with facts because Big Ten football probably a little bit more better than I do. But we're each entitled to our opinion. Your opinion might be right. Mine could be right. Yours probably is. Okay. Let us finish on this last and final topic. Conor McGregor. We covered this a little bit. We're not going to spend too much time on it, but again, we will tell you the big stories. Conor McGregor was the subject of a civil trial in Dublin, Ireland, for allegations of sexual assault. Conor McGregor is the biggest name in the MMA and UFC space, so we do have to talk about these issues as they come up. The update on that case, and again, people can find it. Conor was found liable. I believe it was a bench trial. I take that back. I believe it was a jury. But he's ordered to pay in the vicinity of $200,000. He was found liable. Two men, McGregor and I believe a friend of his or an acquaintance of his, were both accused of sexual assault. The friend was exonerated, for lack of a better term, and the finding was solely against Conor McGregor. McGregor, in an immediate statement on social media, said he was going to appeal, which I fully anticipate him doing. In the aftermath, we're seeing it. We're seeing a lot of brands, starting at least having the conversation about cutting bait with Conor. So we're seeing this in real time. We spent a lot of time on the last podcast talking about Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson literally went to jail for allegations. I don't even say allegations, for a criminal court finding against him. That's what we have on Conor right now. We'll see what happens on the appeal. We'll see if the charges hold. But for the time being, the legacy of one of the greatest UFC fighters in history is very much be called into question. I don't know how you want to phrase it. And his jeopardy in his future in UFC is very much still a question mark. I know we were on a podcast a couple weeks ago saying that we still thought Dana was going to have him fight, and Conduct Detrimental Resorts World Casino had Conor at like minus 150 or something to fight again in the octagon. I am less confident about that today, and we'll see. We'll see how much the backlash is, but it's ongoing. And this case came out on Friday, and it's still Wednesday, and we're still seeing brands make decisions with respect to Conor. So keep an eye on it, but that is ongoing as we speak. Okay, gentlemen, I think we can put this episode in the books and wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. Is that fair? Good?
Yeah, think we're ready for it.
I think we are ready for it as well. Okay, that'll do it for us here. Oh, guys, we buried the lead, the most important thing. Dan Wallach will not be silenced. Dan Wallach had his Twitter account hacked. So if you're getting tweets from an account and you're wondering, why am I following this person? It is Dan Wallach's hacked account. So he's in the process of getting it back. If you get an email from someone pretending to be Dan Wallach or Dan Wallach an email, don't respond to it because it's probably not him. So we're working on fixing it. Just know we are aware of it. Conduct Detrimental HQ, which fired off a couple tweets on the topic from Dan Wallach, is aware of the issue. So just be on the spam alert from Dan Wallach. Taryn,
So
go ahead.
He's been silenced at Wallach Legal, but generally he's not going to be silenced. That's what we want people to know.
Yes, but if a scammer is pretending to be Dan Wallach, they will also not be silenced. So Dan will not be silenced, and the scammer has yet to be silenced because they still have access to the account. So just be mindful that we're aware of it. And in all seriousness, if Elon, you're listening to this, we need to get Dan Wallach his account back. We need to do it. Dan and his 27,000
loyal
followers.
Listener to the Conduct Detrimental podcast.
Definitely not. But he might have some AI tools that identify when podcasts say his name. So that's very possible. Very possible. Okay. Mike, I'm looking at you. You look pretty good. You look pretty hungry. You ready to have the pre-Thanksgiving feast, Taryn? You look very hungry as well, very dapper as always. I think we can end it here. Guys, on the words of the famous Tom Brenneman, I don't know if we're going to be here on this podcast next week. We might be canceled for our first segment. But if you listen to the whole thing, you know, we're just good guys. We're just trying to explain this as best as we can, delicate topics. And we do it each and every week here on Conduct Detrimental. So wishing all of you, our loyal listeners, a very happy and healthy Thanksgiving. And we wish you a great 5-day weekend. Okay, that'll do it for us here at Conduct Detrimental. We will see you next time on another lovely and lawful episode of the Sports Law Podcast, Conduct Detrimental.